Hi, I'm Lauren Brown, and I'm here with Kenny Swanson. If you caught Facebook Live a minute ago, sorry, technical issues. So Kenny is a young man who has been living with Alzheimer's for about 20 plus years using an ADHD medication. And I've asked him to come here today to tell us his story, his own words, so you could see him so you didn't think I was making it up. All right, so Kenny, give me a little bit of the backstory.
The backstory, okay. I lived a normal working man's life, and I ran my own machine shop. And one day, it was sometime after I was 60 years old, I began to realize that I just really didn't give a hang whether I did business or not. I really didn't give a hang whether I associated with people or not. And that was about when I was after 60 years of age. Now one day when I was 65, I'm driving east on Losey Street in Galesburg, Illinois. I was about 10 blocks from home. I did not know why I was in my truck. I couldn't figure out where I was going or what I was looking for. And I thought then, I gotta go see Joe. Now, Joe is my doctor. At the next corner was the hospital. So I turned left and I went up and saw Joe. Now, Joe, my doctor, but he's still, to me, he's Doc Joe. So I walked in and I said, Doc Joe, I got a problem. He said, well, what's that? So we talked for about 15 minutes, and I told him what my situation was. He said, I want you to go home, get June, I'm going to call her. You bring her back up here in about 45 minutes to an hour. So I went home. I knew I could go home all right. And we got home, and June jumped in the car half hour later, and we went back up. And when we got back to Dr. Joe's office, you know, I always have resented medical people talking about me when I'm in the same room, because I feel like I'm a piece of dead meat hanging up off the ceiling, and they're just talking about me, around me. But Joe told June, I think you better get all of Kenny's affairs straightened out. I've talked to some friends of mine, and we think that he will probably be in an Alzheimer's ward within a year. Now, I pretty much want to do things my way. So I said to him, Doc, you got to do something. Is there anything at all that you can help me just to stretch it out a little time? And he said, well, just a minute, be right back. He went back in his other office. He came back and he said, well, I talked to my two friends. One is, all right, my wife uses the terminology. He's a professor down at Washington University. He's one of these head shrink people. What do they call those?
Psychologist.
No,
Psychologist,
it starts with
neurologist.
Neurologist. It's a neurologist. So he talked to the one down at Washington University, and he talked to the neurologist that lives here in Galesburg. And he said, we are going to put Kenny on drug for 2 weeks. It is basically Ritalin, but it's the generic of a methamphetamine. We'll see what happens. So I started taking the methamphetamine. And 3 days later, I was back to myself, thinking like when I was 50 years old, instead of having Alzheimer's, having ADHD. So I began taking Ritalin. That was back when I was 65 years old. I'm 86. I still take Ritalin. And as you can tell by my bibs, I am a machinist. I run a machine shop. My wife, when I got ready to come down here, said, honey, you're going for an interview. You need to be wearing a suit jacket. I said, listen, I had to get up and go open the shop up. I'm not gonna run out there in bibs, come back in here, change clothes, get done with the interview, come back here, put on bibs and get back to work. Because I got customers that are still depending upon me to get a job done at 86. Will I retire? Yeah, the day I die. So, back to the better part of it. I've been doing this now for, like I say, 21 years. And I've always wondered, why is it? And I'm very, very vocal. Now, I talk to everybody. I tell everybody in my church knows I take Ritalin and the generic part of it. Every one of my customers know I take Ritalin. I run into somebody and I have to explain my actions sometimes because I'm probably one of the most talkative people you'll run into. And I like to talk to people. And invariably, I get around to explain I take Ritalin. Why do I do that? Because the Alzheimer's industry, and I call it an industry, doctors, psychologists, drug companies want people to go to the Alzheimer's ward.
Now I'm going to pause you for a second. The 2 times that you didn't take it, what happened?
Well, both the times I did, it's not that I didn't take it. I fell in a restaurant and I had to have surgery on my elbow. It was about as big around as a tennis ball down here in about 5 minutes. And I think my wife called it a bursitis. Now she's a medical person, I don't understand the lingo sometimes. But she took the Ritalin pill with her and she went to the recovery room and then she gave it to the recovery nurse and said, as soon as Kenny wakes up, you give him this Ritalin tablet. He's got to have it. She sat in the waiting room, and she sat in the waiting room, she sat in the waiting room, and nobody's coming after her. Now, my wife was the department head of the hospital. She don't take no guff from nobody. And she went down there to the recovery room, and I'm sitting there, drooling down, bent over halfway to my knees, and I am in a stupor. And she yelled at the nurse. And, well, my wife's last name is different than mine. Well, Mrs. Gable, we have to get it from our pharmacy. Well, June was the department head at the hospital. She don't put up for no guff. So she had a knockdown yelling match with the nurse, shoved that pill down my throat. It took up, so June tells me, I don't remember this, but June tells me it took between 35 and 40 minutes for me to come back to myself. And, well, I was just fine. Until I had to go down to St. Francis Hospital for surgery. I'd had a major accident on an ATV, and I had to have couple of vertebrae fixed in my back and had to have my right hip put back into place. And when I woke up, they did not give me a Ritalin, and the same scenario all over again. But this was in June's hospital, and she didn't care. She had a knockdown drag out with the recovery people, and the same scenario. If I don't take the Ritalin, now if I do take it at 7 o'clock in the morning, just a little bit shy of 9 o'clock that night, one way or another, I'm going to start talking total gibberish. I am a Gideon. Now, Gideon is a group of folks, men primarily. They're changing it though, they're getting a lot of women involved. And we give out Bibles. I have the reputation in Illinois of giving out more singularly, personally purchased Bibles than any other Gideon in the entire state of Illinois. I'm very aggressive about it. But why do I take the Ritalin? To stay active, to keep focused. Without the Ritalin, I'm going to turn into a gibbering idiot. If I did not take my Ritalin this morning, by about noon, this is a little after 10 o'clock, well, 10:15 now. By noon, I would be talking total gibberish if I had not taken it. But I rely on it. So I formed some opinions about Ritalin, the doctors, the Alzheimer's industry. And I gotta do a sideline shoot here. I have a son who spent many years in the Air Force. And he come down with cancer, the pancreas. And because he has that many years in the Air Force, he gets all of his medication and treatments free. So he went down to Barnes Hospital in St. Louis. They were amazed at his stamina. And they did such a good job, I thinks to myself, well, Self, you bet, here's a chance. So I called Barnes Hospital. And I asked for the research people concerning Alzheimer's. A lady came, I don't know if she's young or old, but she was very opinionated just like I am. And I told her my son's story, that Barnes has done so much for him, helping with his pancreatic cancer, that he knows he's still going to die from it. But I said, this is what I have experienced fighting Alzheimer's, ADHD, and I take methadone. And she said to me on the phone, Mr. Swanson, we really aren't concerned with what you're experiencing, and we really aren't concerned in trying to find out what other people are doing concerning Alzheimer's. We are a research group, and we have grants that we have to get in order to continue researching on Alzheimer's. So she hung up and I hung up and I called another one. Same scenario. So they hung up and I hung up and I called a third Alzheimer's group. I get the same answer from he's going to do it. Anyhow, back to my story. If I get customers that don't like what I'm doing, I'm going to be out of business. Now, there's 3 Alzheimer's groups that I talk to. I have not got the vaguest idea how many people and how many individual groups are doing research concerning Alzheimer's. But my personal opinion, those people, because that lady said to me from Barnes Hospital, we are getting grants. That automatically follow the money, honey.
Okay, so now we need to steer it on back.
Okay.
Because we talked about how Alzheimer's and ADHD are connected. What was it like when you were in school as a child? Okay, what things did you do well with? What things did you struggle with?
What did I struggle with? I struggled with esteem, self-esteem, because, again, my opinion, I'm smarter than all the rest of them put together. So I think. But my Latin teacher got so mad at me because she'd give a flash test and I would do great. I would be the only one in the entire class that would pass some of her flash tests. But I had to work hard at Latin. Mathematics? Nah, I got a computer inside my brain. Addresses, phone numbers, remember everything. I still remember things that went on when I was a child, and I can close my eyes and I can remember the room. I can remember the people that were there. I can remember the nurse that was stuck needles in my arms round and around for 3 years. That's a different story. But I got a fantastic memory a long time ago. And with Ritalin, I still got good functioning now. I was very skilled with my hands. My brother played a trumpet and won the first seat in the band first time he tried. I went to our band director, and he's going to help me learn an instrument. Well, we did this, we did that. Finally got down to drums. I can't, and one day he says, Kenny, I know that you want to be able to play an instrument, but you do not have one single rhythm bone in your entire body. You'll never be able. I can't even sing right without staying on tune. But I'm a machinist, and I'm mechanical, and I can build a house starting with the shovel and finishing nailing the roof on. I can do lots and lots of stuff, mechanical. I'm like everybody else. But let's get back to the riddle. Why is it, satisfy my mind, why is it doctors take the Hippocratic oath, and I sometimes say, as far as this type of situation, it's the hypocrite's oath. I recently was at a class reunion, and Sue and Dwayne were gone. I had spoke to Dwayne 4 years ago when Sue began showing signs of wandering off in her mind. And I suggested to Dwayne that he see about talking to his doctor about riddle. His own doctor wouldn't talk to him. So Dwayne changed doctors and went to another doctor in Toulon, Illinois. And that doctor told my friend Dwayne, that man lied to you. If we give Sue Ritalin, her kidneys will fail and she will die within 6 months. Now, I know for a fact that doctor was checking his checkbook, protecting himself, but he was a flat-out liar.
Okay, hey, we're gonna stay objective here.
Okay, stay objective. Doctors are not, and doctors and the pharmaceutical companies are wanting all the patients they can get, and you're not protecting the people. You're not thinking about the loved ones that are losing friends. So ADHD. I've been thinking about this, and I'm beginning to believe that the medical society wants the old people to die off. So they don't treat them. And you need to start thinking about what those old people can do. I'm 86, I'm still functional. In the Gideons, I'm the secretary of the local camp and have a high regard from all my peers in the entire state of Illinois. I'm 86. It's because of Ritalin.
When you're on the phone late, what do they say to you?
Well, one night, I was talking to the president of the camp, and Harold said, Kenny, when did you take your Ritalin this morning? I said, I don't know, Harold, about what, 7, 8 o'clock? He says, hang up the phone, go take a shower, and go to bed. You're talking total gibberish. It's 10:30. 10:30 in the evening, and I was done. The brain wasn't, and I was just talking total gibberish. So, Laura and I got to talking. I don't really know how this came about. Our conversation started in the first place. I know it was...
Because I do a lot of work with Alzheimer's. I think it was when the book came out.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it.
And we was talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyhow, then I found out what she does, and she asked me if I would do this. Yeah, anything to help with Alzheimer's. But let's get on the stick, folks. Let's start thinking about the people, the lives that are being affected. Sue is still alive. She's in an Alzheimer's ward. She doesn't know Dwayne had a heart attack and died last year, because she don't remember it. She was even married to him. And I lost my best friend, and his wife lost her too. She's not dead. she's walking around, somebody's paying the bills at a nursing home, somebody's feeding her, there's other people who got jobs, yeah. But you know, they could find jobs in other fields, make jobs. That's what technology is all about.
Okay, so here's my next question. We talked about doing this interview because I speculate that Alzheimer's and ADHD are on the same track. And we talked about how ADHD really kind of almost seemed to be the starting point as opposed to a risk factor.
Okay, that brings up a conversation between me and my son. After I started taking Ritalin, my son was working for a facility down in Macomb, Illinois. And he said to me, Dad, we work with these young children. Dad, you've had ADHD all the years I can remember. We didn't know what it was, but he says, now that I'm working with these kids, I know you've had ADHD all your life. So, did I function? I didn't know it. When I was young, there was no such thing as ADHD. Sure, it was there. Nobody had ever identified it. But when you did identify it, somebody started to do something about it. So, that same son, I remember, 5 years old, Jonas Salk just invented it.
Okay, we're not doing the polio story.
Okay, we're not doing this one.
Because we're going to stay on this one.
Okay.
Okay, so.
But I do want to say, I think that every Alzheimer's group wants to be the group that cured Alzheimer's. They don't care about working together in collaboration.
Okay, so would it make sense for Alzheimer's researchers to look into using Ritalin as treatment?
Okay, it goes back to Dr. Joe again. He gave me this Ritalin. 6 months later, I was in for a checkup, and I said, Joe, I got a question. How many people around that you know of, is there anybody other than me that's taking methylphenidate? He says, Kenny, in Galesburg, Illinois, right here, amongst me and other doctors I've talked with, there are currently, and this was back 20 years ago, there are over 80 people in Galesburg taking methylphenidate, and every single one of them are having the same exact results you're having. It just has totally changed their lives. Every one. So, ADHD, my son would work with them in Macomb with the children, and he tells me I had ADHD all my life. That means this was just leading up to it. And sure, is that a fact? Laura and I have discussed this, and she's working on the premise that ADHD is just a preliminary to Alzheimer's. I really think that is the exact fact. But follow the money, honey.
Okay, so as we close this up, my hypothesis is that ADHD is not a risk factor for Alzheimer's, but it's the start of the continuum. So, one who is ADHD not diagnosed until I was an adult, I suspect that when parents choose to work with the symptoms, okay, and not medicate, I completely understand that. I use it, I teach it, I train it, okay? And that's fine. But I think once it's made aware, we're made aware of that condition, that neurologically we need to start watching it. Because I believe it's on the trajectory to Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's takes 20 years before symptoms start to show up. I think that anyone on the ADHD spectrum needs to be monitored and watched closely for that. And I do believe that we can use ADHD medications for Alzheimer's. If we can start ADHD medication sooner, it may not cure it. It doesn't cure it, but it certainly makes life livable.
That's what I've told my wife. This is not a cure. This is a treatment. You can treat it every single day and you're going to stay just like I am. You're going to live your life wonderfully. You're not going to find a cure for Alzheimer's because you got a body, it's made out of flesh and blood and becomes meat, and it's from the day you're born, it starts to rot away. And if your brain rots faster, that's what you got.
And so by using ADHD meds to adjust the neurological imbalances in people with ADHD, it quite possibly may slow down immensely Alzheimer's. So we need to look at those neurological focuses. So ADHD and Alzheimer's, the symptoms are very similar, different for the ages, but they are very similar. And so I wanted you to meet Kenny because you reading it on my paper almost makes it sound fabricated. As you can tell, Kenny has his own mind. Is not afraid to give a piece of his mind.
There's one other thing too about that. Mm-hmm. When you're going to do the evaluation, put down some forms of the educational background of each patient, what their projections are and possibilities of a future lifestyle and a profitable service to the community, and what's going to happen if they go into an Alzheimer's ward and they can no longer function. Now, I do a lot of inventing of things on a mechanical scale. If I had been put in an Alzheimer's ward 20 years ago, there's a lot of things that would not be being manufactured today because I would have never invented it. One of those things. Every one of you ever lose a phone, drop a phone and break it? I was out in the timber and I put mine on a chain. And when that ATV tipped over, I did not lose my phone. It was tied to me. I had a friend who fell 4 steps into the lower level of her split level home. Her phone wound up across the room. It took her 3 days to get to her phone, and she died. Now, a chain, it'll be for sale. But there's other inventions working on now that if I had been in Alzheimer's ward, all of these patients that go to Alzheimer's wards, what wonderful things they may have invented and cured things that we got problems with today. So quit sending them to Alzheimer's ward. In fact, challenge them to become more productive with their hands.
My last hypothesis within this is that if ADHD is the continuum as opposed to a risk factor, our projection of 13 million people having Alzheimer's by 2050 is now grossly understated. Currently, there are about 7 million people with Alzheimer's. There's about 7 million people with ADHD. I do think God made that, so I would notice the similarities and pay attention. So if that's the case, by the time 2050 comes with the current numbers, it's not 13 million, it will be 20 million. It is important and imperative that we look to see if it really is a risk factor or if it's a continuum. As other kids come up and other adults are diagnosed with ADHD, that's going to increase and throw all of the projections for Alzheimer's out the window. Alzheimer's is on track to bankrupt the healthcare system by 2050. Here we are, almost at 2025. What happens if we double that number? It won't take till 2050 to bankrupt the healthcare system. Okay, anything else you would like to add there, sir? You think we got it all?
Keep me posted. I'm interested in this. I want to know what's happening.
Very good. All right, friends, I thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Feel free to put some comments in the chat below. Feel free to direct message me. And this transcript will be in the chat within the next couple of days. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.